This is a poorly built team. They're undersized, undermanned, they're soft, they're set up to fail. And to me, the way this team is built, it's inexcusable. They shouldn't be against the biggest team in the league. They're getting outmanned in front of the net. You got two small defensemen there trying to battle Tom Wilson. It's not going to end good. Crosby deserves way more than this. At the level that he's playing at, where he's at right now in his game, his career, this is not enough for Sidney Crosby to do some damage with. He needs a better team around him. Mike Sullivan needs better players to coach. And it's not going to be better players. It's got to be put together the right way for these guys to be able to have a chance to make the playoffs. And I don't see it. And for me, it's on Kyle Dubas. You getting paid $7 million a year? That's what I expect. If it's a rebuild, then rebuild. If it's not, then we got to see better results on the ice. This is inexcusable to me.
Lots of Pirates, Penguins, Steelers, and Pit Hoops today. We'll hit on everything. That is PK Subban, NHL analyst on ESPN, ripping Kyle Dubas. The Penguins lose 2 games this weekend. They come back from the Four Nations face-off break, and God, they lay an egg against Washington. I thought played a lot better against New York, but they lose on aggregate over the weekend, 13-6. They got absolutely shellacked by the Washington Capitals. And in one of the intermission breaks, PK Subban takes the organization really to task. And it's a simple question from the start. 412-928-9370. Do you agree with PK Subban that Sidney Crosby deserves better? Do you agree with PK Subban that Mike Sullivan deserves better? I don't. I had an epiphany watching the Four Nations face off. I had an epiphany in my time away thinking about Pittsburgh sports as a whole, but specifically for the purposes of this segment, niching down on the Penguins. Folks, at some point, the bill comes due. At some point, you're going to have to pay for your success. And for the Penguins, they have paid for their success now by not winning a playoff series since 2018, and they're not going to win one, spoiler alert, this season. But that's not on Kyle Dubas. That's on the final few months, if not longer, of the Jim Rutherford tenure. And that's on Ron Hextall for being the worst general manager that the Penguins have had in 4 decades. It's not on Dubas. Dubas took a shot his first offseason. He brought in Erik Karlsson. He got a ton of bad contracts off the books in order to bring in Karlsson. So even though Karlsson hasn't worked out, he was still able to move a bunch of bad players and too much money off of this salary cap. And then it didn't work out. And guess what he's done? He's turned this thing into a full-blown rebuild. At least as much as he can. Chris Letang, no trade clause. Evgeny Malkin, no trade clause. Brian Rust, no trade clause. Sidney Crosby, untouchable. These guys cannot and will not be moved. And so maybe that's why a guy like PK Subban says, well, you got your feet on both sides of the fence. Kyle Dubas is doing everything that he can to rebuild this team. I don't know that Penguins fans need to hear that, but your team is rebuilding. I was not happy with the way that they lost to Washington on Saturday, but I ain't hurt that they lost. I didn't love the way it went against New York yesterday because you outplayed them, and God, do I hate that franchise. But I'm not bummed out that they lost. Why? Because they should be losing. Now, Crosby doesn't want to lose. Sullivan doesn't want to lose. I'm sure if you looked every single one of those guys in the dressing room in the eye, none of them want to lose. But I bet you Dubas does. I bet you Fenway wants to lose. This is a rebuild. And aren't they clearly rebuilding? This is why I look at PK Subban like one of those dogs where you start whistling, they turn their head on the side, then they turn their head on the side, then they turn their head on the side. Like, have you been paying attention, bro? The Penguins have 15 picks in the top 3 rounds over the course of the next 3 years. 15 picks, top 3 rounds. 3 years. They have 5 first-round picks the next 3 years. Wilkes-Barre, look at the standings. Now a top 5 team in the AHL. They're currently sitting in the 6th spot, the Penguins are, in the draft order. It's not out of the question that they lose enough to pick 4th. And in either spot, they'll have a legit shot at the number 1 overall pick. Folks, this is a rebuild. And they're actually losing a ton while still having guys on the roster that you want to pay money to go watch play hockey. You still get to watch Sidney Crosby every other night. And the schedule's going to be condensed coming down the stretch. You want to watch Sid, you want to watch Gino, you want to watch Letang, you can. And guess what? They'll still suck. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Eventually the bill comes due.